On another note, how many people here have seen any of the trolls that have popped up around the Seattle area? Those are amazing creatures, aren't they? Those by the Danish artist, Thomas Gambo, are all made out of recycled and found materials and are also supported by the Scan Design Foundation. So we're really excited to have a partnership with them for all the things that they do for the university and for the connections between the University of Washington, Seattle, United States, and Denmark. So with that, I'd like to introduce Nancy Rottle, who's going to talk about this program and also our speaker tonight.
Thank you, Catherine, and welcome to you all. As Catherine said, my name is Nancy Rottle. I'm a professor emeritus now in the University of Washington's Department of Landscape Architecture, and I remain the director of the UW Green Futures Lab in the college. And I just want to really thank all of you for joining us this evening for a lecture that I think is going to blow your socks off. From the Copenhagen from the Copenhagen nature-based firm of SLA. So Rasmus Astrup's lecture is the second this year as a revival of the Global Green Lecture Series that Catherine mentioned. And that lecture series showcases sustainable planning and design in both the Pacific Northwest and Denmark. And since 2007, it has sponsored a number of speakers and panels addressing exemplary sustainable design for the urban realm, sharing much-needed solutions that can inform both sides of the Atlantic, advancing both planetary environmental health and local cultural vitality. For any of you, how many of you saw Martine Kildevue's lecture in the spring from Blocks Hub in Copenhagen? So that was the first of the revival. We're asking the question, what new ways of thinking and designing are needed to create a future in which we want to and can live? We have enormous challenges and opportunities. So, as mentioned, the Global Green series is generously supported by the Scan Design Foundation, for whom we give profound thanks for the series funding from its inception. We're recording the lectures, and they are or will be posted on the Green Futures Lab website, which it's greenfutures.washington.edu, and also has a rich array of downloadable resources for planning and design of the public realm that we've published over the last 15 or so years. And many of those have also been supported by the Scan Design Foundation. So with that, I'm so pleased to welcome and introduce Rasmus Astrup from SLA. Now, I know several of you in the audience have experienced the innovative projects that SLA has realized in Copenhagen and Malmö, Sweden on our trips together, and I expect you will really delight in remembering those again, as well as hearing about new projects in North America and around the world. SLA's nature-based design studio is centered around the multifaceted capabilities of city nature, addressing climate mitigation and adaptation, biodiversity, and the human experience of cities, aiming to elevate the quality of life for all species. Utilizing both the social and biological values of city nature, over the past 30 years, the firm has master planned and designed notable public spaces worldwide, from award-winning climate adaptation projects in Copenhagen, the green-blue transformation of Denmark's largest social housing estate in Aarhus, which is awesome, I've been there, the design of Norway's new government quarter in Oslo, to urban biodiversity parks in Abu Dhabi, large-scale master plans in Toronto, and urban plazas in Shanghai. The firm's mission is to design places for life, all life. So Rasmus is here to tell us about a few of these projects. He's a partner and design principal at SLA, where he spearheads the studio's largest and most complex international projects. He's a leading specialist in city nature. He was at our studio this afternoon and made great comments, and sustainable landscape architecture and integrated climate adaptation. And he has led SLA's most forward-looking and award-winning projects all over the world. His perpetual emphasis on creating the best possible places for life and in all life is continuously manifested through inspiring and green urban spaces with living ecosystems that help create robust cities, better living environments for humans, as well as biodiversity, and a higher quality of life. He's the recipient of several major international honors, amongst them the 2021 World Landscape of the Year Award. So I very much trust that Rasmus's lecture will inspire you to see possibilities for your own study, planning, and design work in the Pacific Northwest and wherever you're working. So we plan to have some time for your questions at the end. So let's get started. So please join me in welcoming Rasmus Astrup.
So thank you for that introduction. Thank you for coming. It's fine like this. It's been great to be here. It's been great to see the amazing campus you have, and I will repeat to all of you. It was the only thing that annoyed me was when I entered the door. It says the built environment. So I think you need to add the grown environment in the naming of your faculty. But despite that, what was going on inside that door was really great. And of course, linking to what we do in our studio, we are based in Copenhagen. We also have a studio in Oslo in Norway, and one in Aarhus, the second biggest city in Denmark, and we are an interdisciplinary studio. So we have anthropologists, biologists, sociologists, landscape architects, and so on. We have one rule, that is that we don't design buildings. We leave that to the building architects, but we do master plans, we do massing, but we care about what's outside of the buildings to emphasize our expertise in that, and not become like most of the architects who have 360 degrees. They just miss marriage consulting, then they know the answers to everything in the world. That's a little bit like the tendency right now. So stick to what you know the best and become even better at that constantly is an advice. And the starting point for everything is nature. And the way we work is the values of nature, and it's also the scientific approach that the power in a plant is all the things you can see. It's not in the green stuff. The power in every plant is in the roots. The roots is where the magic happens. That's where the mushrooms inform other plants, where there's polluted soil, where there's the best drinking water. They are actually friends below ground, all of the plants out there. So to think about soil, to think about the whole system of a plant is basically a starting point for us. This is my hand holding a plant where we had contaminated soil, and we used the plants to basically eat the oil pollution. That's how clever plants are. This is my son some years ago. It was after a storm and my little dog in Denmark. And you can see the tree over there, it went down. What did it do? It started to grow again from the roots. That's how powerful it is. So that respect of the ecosystems is definitely something that we think about, but we also think about a lot of other things. We think about time, we think about the world, where it's going. We think about what does it mean to be where we are. This is something that we expressed in an exhibition in Denmark, where there's a saying about a moment in time, but there's also a place in between the future and now that we call a space of time. It's hard to explain in English, but it just makes you reflect on your impact and where you owe a responsibility. For instance, if you work with First Nations, we do so in Canada, they say that every decision you make needs to count for 7 generations. I think a lot of us failed in that. I think cities, especially the modern cities, were guaranteed not planned for 7 generations ahead of us. I think we didn't plan the cities for life, all life. So there's something to learn about the past and the future and the responsibility and the impact that we want to do. We also need to understand time of where we are. We are all sophisticated. I flew here in an airplane. If you understand how many people who actually never tried flying, or people who never used the internet, it's interesting to sometimes reflect on where other places in the world are going and how that should impact us, our decisions, and the people that look into us. The migration of people. We work in Vancouver. I'm going there tomorrow morning. 100,000 people yearly move to Vancouver. That's like a gigantic city in Denmark. So the scale and the impact is just insane. And in our project in Vancouver, speaking of time, this is our site. So this tree that is cut down is 1,000, maybe it was 1,500 years old. And our site is in a forest. But it reminded me of time. The time when Europeans came and literally just cut down the entire tree canopy. They didn't leave any single tree, not even around the little water ground. There's some few places in Vancouver where you can find first growth, but we were super efficient. And I say us because I'm a European. We came and we literally chopped down, we clear-cutted everything. We used the small trees to actually carry the big valuable trees. So there's something about the moment in time, looking backwards and forward. Where are we? What is the responsibility? Because this is the second growth, so what was the third growth? That was some of the questions we answered, but we had to go back. We had to understand how come it was a celebration for human beings to cut down. The bigger the better. And remember, biodiversity comes from big old trees and from dead trees. So those people, my co-Europeans, we were cutting down homes for other types of life that had lived there for 2,000 years. And we didn't care about it. They're still cutting down trees that old. And I just think that is interesting. And at the same time, when those trees were cut down, there was a Danish scientific guy, or he was a philosopher. He wrote a book that was about the value of nature, but not in the scientific, how much wood can you get out of it, or all of the thing you can harvest it, but actually the value in the sense of the aesthetic feeling you get. Like, is an old tree more valuable than a new tree, not just because of the biodiversity, but because you can feel it. I brought my family to Vancouver, and there was an island next to Vancouver Island where they preserved it. It's the biggest non-violent riot ever happened in North America. Greenpeace got involved. Now an UNESCO site. It's an entire island with 3,000 years old tree, and you can feel it. So what is that? Where's that? How can you measure that? What's the value? Can you look it up? It's difficult, and I think that this is a fundament of what we work, and that is why I say the growth environment. This is going to be all of your students who are landscape architects the biggest issue, because the developers and the guys in the municipality and the authorities and all of the other ones that you're going to talk to don't know how to price the value of the aesthetic feeling of being in nature. They can only price square meters per concrete or wood. Now they build in wood, but per floor. So some of the things we are working with in our studio is to strengthen the way that you communicate and talk about the nature feeling. And then of course it's the nature of cities. So when we got this project, we started, because I think the most of the things I do is to, or we do, is to bring a forest into the city. I never built a city in a forest. And my first take was, we're not going to do that project. We can't. It's going against our values. Then we found out that they had a clear-cut zoning allowance, and we could. So we said, if we can preserve more than 50% of the forest, we will be interested in working with you. And then we started how cities are made, right? In North America, all cities are made very classical engineered, right? It's like you completely ignore topography, the flow of water, all of the ravines. I mean, well, maybe in Toronto you can see ravines coming down, but it's strange. And then you can see some of the suburbs, and we try to flip that and say, why isn't it the starting point to understand the ravines, the systems, the corridors for the animals, and then design a city around that? Maybe making buildings on columns, making something where your impact and your path are different. And it's challenging. I won't say that we got it completely where we wanted it, but again, it's the way of working. It's about saying, what is the bigger generosity? What is the 7 generations ahead of us? What is the contribution, the big impact that we want to do? And then, of course, also talking about other values than just biodiversity. This is another example of that. How do you address to someone that nature is important? It's the biggest, not dormitory, but collegium, where the students sleep in the Nordic countries. It's made in the 70s, and this is not an illustration on the right side. It's a picture taken half a year ago. So that was, of course, a big impact on a project that was designed in the 70s, where someone found out that you can build buildings in a smarter way by precasting big concrete elements, and it was efficient and amazing. And when it was done, they apparently could only afford 4 trees that was like already not growing after they planted them, and a lawn, right? So it showed the progress of the built environment and the big lack of any consideration of the grown environment, right? Something misleading happened at that time. So we were contacted by that collegium because they wanted, and this is taken 2 years ago, this is how it's supposed to be. This is the big architect's dream. Amazing social space. And they are run by the students themselves. So they have independence over and saying over the budget, and they had to hire us and so on. And they were so cool. So they decided to do 10% affordable housing in the collegium, because no better place to get inspired as a young human being who doesn't know what life is all about, and learn from people who are on their way to take an education as something that they desire, and then discovering that what I assume most of you students have as well is you still don't know what to do about. You're still questioning. I am also questioning myself. So I think the whole fact of bringing people together and sharing some unawareness and some passion is fucking bold, sorry my language, but I think it's so nice that they made that. But then they also consider that maybe because they need to socialize, this environment was not the perfect one, and that was why they hired us. And I think that's a good example, right, of why did my screen went out? Very strange. Just hang on. So one of the reasons why we did that was obviously then to say that, this social impact will be much better if you are in a green space. If all of you went outside on a sunny day and sat on the lawn, it would be normal. But if you sat on the floor right now, you would be very weird. So it's strange how we behave differently. It's informal. That's why we do walk and talks and all these sorts of things. When we are outside, we behave differently. And that strengthens the social condition between people. And I'm not the only one saying that. There are people who study that. What does it mean to bring something green into the social capital? You start to feel a sense of place. You start to suddenly feel proud of where you are. And when you do that change, your brain starts. So I try to take that technical diagram and say, you need to plant a lot of trees, and you have an impact on the city. The city influences your physical body. And when your physical body starts to change, finally your mind starts to change. And then you help each other. Then you become more confident. You're more patient. So that was basically the value of it. But the strange thing is that was also the value of when they designed it, right? This is actually how it's designed. This is the finished project. What you see here, that's the gray spine, as the architect's big vision was. Let's make a social gray spine. So what we did was we just cleared it off, repaired the membrane, and throw in some new tiles and some plantings. And every time you see a gray roof or a black roof, think of this project. Don't call us, it's fine, you can do it yourself, but it's more, this is something we need to do. And it's possible, and of course the biggest impact is the students that live there. The awareness, how it changed their life, how they are now proud of it. And I went there recently and they claimed they made it, so I was not even part of that project anymore. And that's where it should. That means that they are taking ownership. And I don't want to die, I have so many projects, but it's like a highline, right? But it's not the same. It's a program that is linking to all of the sleeping facilities, and it's, of course it's also strange, like the other day I was thinking about this project. Like, we work with nature, city nature, but nevertheless, all the projects we do are influenced by a road or building or previous train track, or it's always the infrastructure. It's back to the grid. So how can you change that and challenge that, and of course create as many zones as possible? Create a success is by, this is the students, you can literally see, like, move the barbecue over there, don't do this stage here. So of course a successful way is also just to be humble and ask others about what they want to do. And it's just interesting, it works. It's about biodiversity. They press just tremendously on the biodiversity values. So we had to accomplish that. And this is just some of the tools of how we variate it. You need, for instance, bare soil, so you need dead trees, as I said before. So everything is not green, it's just a color. It's really carefully designed with our biologists. We already mapped new species, as you can see over here. There's systems where people go in and mention which type of species there are there. And it's just something that I think matters. I think this guy is sitting there because of that biodiversity. And I think it's completely weird that we, for many years, have been fans of other projects that was literally my dream project, but I was like, what the hell am I going to do there? Right? It's not designed for human beings. It's beautiful, but it's controlled. So I think this is Le Corbusier. Poor kids, man. Right? And he even spent money on it, designing a concrete jungle for kids. What's up with that? So I think it's interesting how we can learn from that and suddenly change the green space into a social value, a biological value, a sustainable value, and a financial value. And speaking of finance, this is how we work with projects like that in Copenhagen. It's like a factor, and I freaking love the Highline. It's the coolest project ever. So no disrespect of that. It's really, really cool. But it's just a different factor to work with such a project than ours. We had literally no money to do this project, including fee. So we had to be creative. And one of the things I found out was that this facade needed to be renovated, and they wanted to cost, I don't know the English name, but it's called Rustyfina in Latin, but it's a tree that has a lot of roots from the stem. It has a root system that's powerful. I have it in my own garden, so I knew it very well. And I was like, can we do something smart and get them cheap and then just throw them up there? Of course, the first thing the contractor says, no guarantee, there's all these books. So I had to be careful with the contractor and this, and so I had to call the owner and say if he really liked to work for SLA. Not putting pressure, but just say that maybe it was time to try something new. So we got a 50% warranty on the trees. And that was a new thing. We got money from the guys he already charged to chop them down. So those money were paid for the other guy to move them up on the roof. And it's weird, right? Because when I studied, we became more and more clever. So I learned when I went to the school when I started to become a landscape architect, that it was literally impossible to remove a tree. You need these big machines from Germany. It cost like 2 million. It's impossible. And then I saw how they moved trees when they did parks in Britain back in the days. They just went to the forest and excavated a tree up on the horse ride, and then they planted them. So I was like, maybe we became too careful. We don't take any risk anymore. So we just did it. We just digged up the trees. We brought them up. Because we had no money, we needed this lustrous, right? And they are all growing. So sometimes you just need to be bold and take some risk to manage it. And of course it's about the understanding of the complete ecosystem. It's because I knew it was the right season. I knew the species, so it's not like, it's based on knowledge, but it's also made of daring. And speaking of daring, we had a long passion for soil. Obviously because it's the fundament, as I showed you before, but also because it's a building material that could be very interesting to work on. So we did another renovation of a project where it was a big 70s renovation again, where we had to work with a little small string, as you can see here, and a retaining wall, where we said, okay, it's time to do something new. So we fought and fought to bring in a wall made of soil, stamped earth, as you also know. It took us 2 years to convince the engineer not to build a concrete fundament to support, because we tried to get rid of concrete. We are not there yet. There are still many concerns, but it happened with my dear colleague Sune here, who brought his kit and he started to study soil. We investigated how Germans did it, how you have to, we did mock-ups, and finally we got it there, and yeah, it cracks a little bit, but it's still standing, and it changes time by the day. It's almost alive. It's so sensuous, and it's so beautiful, and it became an identity. It's a place where we work with soundscapes as well, by the way, so you know, soundscapes are really essential for things. Noise is something we all suffer under, most of us who live in cities. So this one was also about sound. We imagined how water and other things could help that. But basically, it's really a project where we again dare. Sometimes you just need to dare. And then we even assemble it. We are again not doing buildings. And oops, we accidentally did one building. So this is our only building. Again, it was only because after they were done with this assembling of the renovation, there were so many materials on site, so we said we can assemble them to a house for you. And they got this building, and it's really made 100% of materials from the site. I even got respect of some of my building architect colleagues. It's not that we want to start to do that, but it was maybe for us the inspiration of the materials itself. It was not the house or the structure, but the fact that these things represented something. Like when we were in Detroit and we found out there were so many bricks available in the city. There's storage of bricks of all of the old houses they torn down, because maybe the soul of Detroit is the soil of Detroit. They have a lot of clay. So again, starting with a material, starting with something else, and just today I feel like round circles or square. Sometimes it's the biodiversity, it's a brick, it's something else that inspires you, but it becomes more meaningful. So suddenly an alley is built from reclaimed bricks, and that's just something that is inspirational for us. Then growth. I don't know if you know what this date is. That is the date that this little globe was inhabited by 8 billion people. So again, growth is not just trees, it's also Homo sapiens, it's houses, it's cars and streets, and it's weird that we still are forgetting this is Paris, the city in Europe with the lowest level of green spaces per habitant. And it's just interesting to constantly consider thinking of First Nation values or others, what are we leaving behind? We are doing a project here in London, and this, there's a golden beaver on top of the historic building right there. It's almost lost. So what is the legacy of all those skyscrapers? I don't know. And what is the purpose of cities? Why are we trying to control them? I think you all remember during the COVID that we suddenly saw pictures, there's thousands of these pictures online, where if we don't do anything, it's so fragile, it takes an instant, and then nature takes over. Suddenly cities were inhabited by new types of life. But was it a problem, or was it supposed to be like that? Or did we design them wrong so they couldn't fit in there? I don't know, I think so. So I think the nature of cities is not made for all life. And it matters. This is 2021. It's the first time a snow owl landed in Central Park since 1890. So you can actually attract snow owls in Central Park. Does it matter? Hell yeah, it matters. It matters a lot. There's no conflict in having biodiversity and a closeness with nature and still have vibrant big cities. And we need that because the biggest crisis out there, there's a lot of crises right now in the world, but nevertheless, biodiversity is the biggest crisis. We cannot get back what we lost in biodiversity. We can contribute in the sense of biodiversity compared to preserving the rainforest or other things, but we can contribute with the awareness. Seattle is a pretty bad example because you have a lot of green spaces around you, but there are other cities that don't. So the awareness of biodiversity is essential because in 2050, 70% of the population live in cities. So if there's no nature there, we don't give a shit about what the nature is in what condition the nature have outside of the cities. So that matters. And it's just a good reminder, this is our project in Detroit, the suburbs where nature took over. I just think it's so interesting. It happened in Manchester as well, where we also do a project. And I just think that that whole thing about uniting nature and built environment is so interesting. And in Manchester, we tried to unite everything. It was an innovation district, and it was good for me that it was an innovation district because I used it to the client, and I said innovation doesn't come from only technology. It's not just tech-based, it should also be based on nature and how nature is contributing. It should be based on an innovation way to integrate thinking beyond the site boundary, stitching back an entire city, celebrating existing structures, not knocking them down, so we have preserved as many buildings as we could. We have like the arches here, preserve them, it's super cool. Some features like that we don't have normally, at least not in Scandinavia. We preserve buildings, and when I say we, it's with Allies and Morris, and a very, very good architectural firm from London, and an ambition client, obviously. Every time we work with a site, we try to add biodiversity, so the numbers up there is how many trees we can add. Constantly putting numbers to it is really valuable. And seeing, because it was innovation, so those trees that stand, so those two trees are existing, and then all of this staircase is new. So I told my team, okay, then you need, they cut them down. I said, no, we can't. So this is an innovation project, so you need to build around the trees. So now there's a hole here, because you can't cover the roots of a tree, then they will die. and then there's a mesh. So suddenly you can lay on a mesh and be close to a tree crown that you couldn't see before. So instead of having 2 existing trees and an obstacle, they became the whole gathering point for the new staircase. So sometimes it's also to change challenges into opportunities, and that was just fun. And then the biggest one was this one. We discovered that the River Medlock, that is maybe the reason why Manchester lays well, we have well, you also have First Nations, so you have as long history, but they just didn't build as much. But even Romans can be tracked back to Manchester, and it was probably because of the river. And that river was missing in our project, because rivers used to be, for the industry, some kind of back of house. It was transportation, it was garbage, and then we become super clever. So we asked the engineers to solve everything, and I have many friends who are engineers, so don't take it wrong, but it's more to say that suddenly everything became modernist. We controlled, we did it in concrete, we added the water in culverts, but we told them, this is your last chance. You are redeveloping the last missing piece of a very important element of the river. And if you don't do it, nobody else will do it. This is your moment of time, because today the water is going in a culvert out here. And that is in the street, that not would happen. And by the way, the name of the street was called Water Street. It's a no-brainer, right? It's like, so we spent a lot of time selling that to say, this is your moment. And every time they went against me, I said, can you please remind, because they were like, that's challenging, never seen before. And I'm like, what was the name of the project? I forgot. Can you tell me, dear client? Because I thought it was Innovation District. So are we not supposed to do something that isn't possible? And we kind of convinced them with the biological link, the social link. It's about Manchester. This could be the new running route in Manchester, or destination, or tourists. But of course, in the end, they were like, yeah, but couldn't it just be such, couldn't it just be, it's still blue, what does it feel like? And then I, of course, said that blue or light green is beautiful color, has nothing to do with what we work with. So we lost it, and then I had to fight it back, and now it is back. But the way we did that was to say, okay, fine. You can either stay here, you can go here and do the SOTs. That means that there is SOTs here, but the river is not connected, or you can connect it truly. But they couldn't measure it, so we said, that's fine, let's put some numbers on it. What does it mean for all the rest of the life? What is the current life conditions of the culvert? What is the life conditions for the SOTs? And what is the life condition for a river that is no longer disconnected to a culvert? Suddenly that became the argument. So we asked them, where do you want to be? Do you want to take care of these animals, or this animal up here? We asked them about the trees, the plants. What is the amount of biodiversity you're willing to bring? What is the quality of the water in the river? Yeah. What is your contribution to the water quality beyond the site boundary? Is it innovative to keep it, or to actually enhance the water quality in a river? Would that be a business case for all the incubators, the young hipsters who have to work there? They actually feel proud, because I work in a campus where they are so bold, so they actually excavated and brought the river back, and now the campus I live on are contributing to clean water in the River Medlock. So eventually, slowly, we got them there. We even tried to measure it. They have something in UK called net gain biodiversity. There's no standard for bringing back a river, so that was like beyond the calculation opportunities, but it was going pretty high. So I just think that it's again an example of, especially for you students, that you need to, the biggest mistake architects do is that they talk to everyone else like they're also architects. But we don't deal with architects or landscape architects, it doesn't matter. We deal with politicians, we deal with business people, we deal with regular people who has a day job that is not related to what our field is. So to be able to communicate in a different way is essential for your success. And it makes you much more humble, and it makes you understand where people are coming from. And this is a good example of that. It's also about Unite. We just did a little workshop in the studio today, and it was very fun, and it reminded me of this project in London. It's called Earl's Court, and in London, in UK, they're starting something that is called landscape-led master plan. So instead of the architects doing their massing and then they ask if I can do some green sprinkle around it, we try to flip it and talk about social values, biodiversity, where is the best spatial organization of the massing. There's still a business case and all, but this is just an interesting reminder and a link to what I saw up in the workshop today. It's a neighborhood where this is one side, this is Kensington, and this is and Chelsea, and this is Hammersmith and Fulham, and this is social housing. This is Bentley Town, and they are divided by the rail corridor, and some of them want to connect, some of them don't, but they have to. So what we did, which I also said today in the workshop, was that we started finding out all of the qualities. For instance, we learned that the guys on the, let's say, not so rich side in that borough, they have less quality of green space, but they shared it. They literally share everything. On the other side, it's closed courtyards with gates, fences. They have higher quality of spaces, but they don't share it. If you live in the wrong neighborhood courtyard, you can't enter the other ones. So there were some learnings from both of them. There were some qualities, and we said, let's look at that. Let's look at the wildlife. Let's look at the qualities and connect it. Connect the two sides with something you care about. Commuting, ecology, and then not looking at railways. That was also something we discussed today on the road, that a lot of the infrastructure in cities are actually not just dividers, they are also connectors, because next to any infrastructure, there's a leftover piece, there's a right of way, and that's actually normally, because nobody wants to pay money to maintain it, a very high ecological value. It's not so nice for the animals to be next to the road or the trains, but still, they have an ecological value. So we said, let's celebrate that. Let's connect it, and let's drive everything with a park placed exactly on top of the edge. And the boroughs were like, but then we can't see which borough starts it in. We were like, no, that's the point, because nobody cares. It doesn't matter. You should just enjoy the park together. And that is still going on. And I think another thing is this one. This is an example of something I also mentioned today. The way we convinced them was about this network was, this is all the things that we contribute within our side. But this one, this urban farm down here, these playgrounds, the parks over here, was the existing things. So it's very difficult to get someone to connect with each other if you only look at the side. But if you start to look at the ecosystem of all of the things that happen, it becomes suddenly about the city. It's not so important if it's your neighborhood or another, right? In reality, this should just be about London. So the network started to take place by actually acknowledging the qualities outside our side boundary. And then Gail, of the grandfather of many thinkings, and you could actually see one in London that says exactly the same, also claimed that what makes people walk, what drives people in networks is luckily green spaces. That's what connects us. So that was definitely a way to convince people to do that. And it's important in a city like London, or any city, to heal and think about what happened with, again, the nature of cities. We have investigated, I think it was like tons of people, and there's just so much that affects us. our mental order, our lack of contact with nature actually reduces our mental health radically. My best childhood memories are always from green areas, playing in the park. It's not playing, crossing an asphalt surface. So I think there's something in that we've forgotten. And this is a picture I found online of an exhibition in I think it was in UK, about the imagination of the future. So they created this mask, and they were sure this little kid would have like an insane experience, and the world would just be fantastic, right? The future can only be brighter. This is the reality. This is Dyson's newest adventure. It came out 2 years ago. It's something that, and you can buy it, it's blocking out noise and air pollution. We became super dumb. We apparently didn't learn anything. We went in the wrong direction. Is that the happiness that we imagined in the 1940s or the 50s, that we should actually get sick of living in a city? It's not like you should survive in a city. You should get energy of being in a city. You should feel happy. You shouldn't be able to, the feeling every time I see someone who really has light in their eyes, it's always because they're on the way to the countryside or something, where you get that feeling inside of the city. So that's what we work with. We try to, because these are some of the challenges. It's air pollution, it's urban heat, it's noise, it's flooding. So every time you do a project, you need to start with those values, and I think that's how we at SLA at least started becoming valuable for a large group of people. That's how we went abroad, because every project is about urban heat, it's about flooding, it's about microclimate, it's about biodiversity and the social value. We also wanted to look nice, but in reality it is about bringing spaces that drives people together socially, that actually takes care of the rainwater, that has an opinion towards microclimate, that put cards on the ground, like this one as well in Novo Nordisk, the first nature park, dead trees, biodiversity, stormwater management, the first one who actually had 100% stormwater management. Again, when we won the biggest award in Denmark for it, the client came and said it was their idea. It's the biggest award you can get is when somebody else claimed that they got the same idea as you, because that means you change them. This is the biggest pharmaceutical company, right? This is the first project, again, where we planted trees in the past so they couldn't walk stressful with their iPhone, because then they hit the trees. This is walk and talk. This is a place where they gained, and again, they claimed they came up with the idea themselves. Or bring nature to students, take responsibility, make them happy when they bike down to the super smart with, there's like electric doors, indoor parking for the bikes. But again, bringing those values into every single project. Start with the values, go back to the values, challenge them, ask the client about them, otherwise you will not succeed. And then again, go abroad. For me, it's been the biggest gift for my professional life has definitely been to go abroad, because we consider ourselves experts in stormwater management. We do that because it was like flooded in Copenhagen in 2011. All of the utility companies, the insurance company went broke. We won this amazing project that is now finally gonna happen, and that brought us so many places. We are working with one in Paris, near Montmartre, where we also work with flooding, biodiversity, all the right values. This is a big old terrain for trains that is now developing into a park, celebrating the rain. So all of these things were so interesting, and we felt like we know it. And then I came to Toronto and did a project. Again, you can see like the innovation district. We won a competition called Quayside. It's one of those places where I work really carefully with the First Nations. They're called Two-Row. Matthew is mega cool. And the first thing he said when I started laughing about stormwater management was, why don't we just call it rain? it's like water that falls from the sky. That's what we call it. Like, oh man, yeah, okay, maybe I also overcomplicated things. And then I was like, wind, we have to block the wind. She was like, that's an image. Like, oh yeah, that's also true, good point. So in the end, it became the understanding of flow and the values of that. And it's not that I didn't have them, that I didn't see, but he moved me to another place, and that was amazing to be able to win this site. This is where Sideboard Labs, the Google developers, made a project, and they developed it all the way to detailed design. It was pretty cool actually. I think it was Hedevig who designed it. They just forgot to tell people that they actually owned all of the information, right? So it was like if I entered, they monitored me that I went to buy a pizza, and then I felt like I need to go to the bathroom, and then I went up and sleep for that amount of hours. I went down and walked again, and the people just went against it, and they had to run out of the site, and it was very difficult for us to approach this competition that we luckily won, because we said the smartest thing based on what we learned from the First Nations was the flow. The smartest thing in the world is just to celebrate rain or water that falls down from the sky. So flow became the idea of everything that we did in this project. And as you can see, it's skyscrapers, it's super tall buildings. So it's of course tough and a very different environment. We don't have anything similar to this where I'm from. So the starting point for us became, and it's, by the way, it's 4 different architects, architects. I'm just a landscape architect, right? So there was also a whole master plan where I needed to find my role in that. But that came by just discussing values, a memory of a place, the legacy, the place that it used to be, and saying to them, what is the legacy, what is the contribution, what is the purpose of your buildings, what is it they want to contribute with. And then they came up with this. It's Alison Brooks, it's Adjay, Henning Larsen, and Architect Alliance, KPMG. So I dared sketching on top of the architect's massing, because I found out that we couldn't compete. We were actually second row. So I said, guys, stop talking about the front row. We don't have that. We have something else. We have urban. And Adjay made this building where we could put, I said, that's probably the biggest urban space. So we have nature, production, and urban string. And then I shared it with the client. He's one of my only 2 clients who are landscape architects, so that helped a bit. It's not that I go against the architects, but he approved it, and then I luckily convinced them, and they agreed to do this project that is really inspired by the flow. It's a community forest, and it's open. We won the competition. Instead of having closed courtyards, we opened everything up to have a generosity as possible. We worked with design principles about having a nice environment in there, and we got a 5,000 square meter urban farm on top of this building right here. And this is how it looks. It's now sending for planning approval, and it's just a new way of thinking. And we brought the flow throughout all of the design decisions. We constantly reminded ourselves of the flow, so it means that throughout the entire design process, we came back to that. We thought about the flow of people, the flow of nature, the flow of food. Food is something you produce. It's something that grows, it dies, and becomes nutrients for you. We thought about weather as a flow, as a condition that constantly changes. And cities are designed statically. That's why we get flooded. Nature gets flooded, it burns down. You know why trees love wind? That's because all of the weak branches, they fall off. It's not a problem. It's like going to the hairdresser. It's in nature, there's no thing like waste or garbage. Everything becomes nutrient. So we need to consider that. And of course, then why should we do an urban farm? Well, that's again the awareness. That's where everyone lives. And kids think that stuff like this is something that grows in the supermarket, just to have the fact that plants need to be wrapped in plastic before you can eat them. It's super dumb, right? So we convinced them to do this urban farm as a gesture, and that was definitely one of our selling points. And I just can't wait to do that. Understand the seasons, the whole terminology. It's really a place where we think that we can change the urban fabric. Of course, we are still challenged by the architects. They don't like when we plaster too much stuff on it. But remember that the role of the building is sometimes to perform like a landscape, and here you can't really contribute to the biodiversity by thinking on the green space, on the plantings. And again, here in Toronto have a super strong biodiversity plan. We get inspired by that. We should get inspiration by what happens in New York, in France, in Paris, and so there's always a lot of learnings. I think all cities should learn from other cities. You should never only look at your own city. Study the net gain biodiversity thing that happened in UK. It's amazing. I don't know how much time I have left. Okay. So I actually think I will manage to do all of the slides. And this is a project in Copenhagen. This is a building that performs like a landscape. And if I go the other way, this is the majority of city buildings out there. So obviously for us to work with someone like BRG is interesting because they challenge the purpose of buildings. It's a waste to energy facility. This whole thing is a warehouse they didn't ask for because otherwise you couldn't get down from the ski slope, so the competition was actually only this part. What we did was to redesign all of the things that is alive up there. We didn't come up with the idea of the ski slope. We were asked to help BRG design the landscape. It was a very cheap project in terms of price per square meter. It was complicated to plant up there, and we really had to study a lot of how to plant on a waste to energy facility where the first thing you learn is that it's hot. When you burn something, you can imagine it's hot. So there's never snow on top of the ski slope, by the way, where it's hot. And then on the other side of the building, there is. So, of course, it affects the planting. It affects the things that you're planting a tree in 80 meters high next to the sea. Windy conditions, and you cannot fix anything because it's a roof. So the whole construction system we had to find out with cranes. We were so close to get them planted with a helicopter. I would have loved to see that, but they could manage to do it with a crane. I never designed a mountain before. So one of the things that we also did was to study the physical impact when you incline. So to understand the difference between walking upwards, where you almost crawl, where your perspective becomes minimal. You can't see the top. So we played on that experience, where the opposite is when you go down, you have an openness. So that whole spatial experience took us quite a long. It hopefully feels logic and natural when you're there, but we really carefully make that design decisions. And then of course, the biodiversity, the contribution. We are big fans of Humboldt in our studio. He understood the climate zones and why there's zones for what type of biology. It's not like it changes on 80 meters, I can say, but nevertheless, what we found out was that the contribution of our side was important because it's landfill. So this is where the ski slope is, and there was literally nothing there. It's landfill. The ecological value was really, really low, because normally we would try to link to that and bring it up to the ski slope, but we couldn't. So we did the opposite. So we said, why don't we bring seed that can spread with the birds? Let's do pollinators. Let's sell some seed bombs, as we call it. We call it a green bomb, a biodiversity bomb. and the client was so afraid of bomb. So this is only a slide I show, it never became official, but it's the same meaning that we have, because instead of just providing clean green energy to the city of Copenhagen, we also provide biodiversity. I think that's a big contribution, and it's not just something I say. This is my two colleagues, they are biologists. They measured 120 new species on the roof. 100 new species that we didn't plant there. That's freaking amazing. On a plant where the thing we did was to do bare roots, not to plant as too extensive, so nature can take over by itself, and it works. And this is a picture my colleague sent. He's an ontologist. He studies birds. It's a bird that likes to live on small hills and mountains. And he sent me that picture. It knows it's not a mountain, right? You can see the plastic on the ski slope, but it voluntarily landed there. So it's an example of the balance between biodiversity, a building, city, and nature, that it actually works. It's artificial, but it works. And the animals, it's like the snow owl in Central Park. I think that is maybe the biggest example. And then this is my last, I didn't thought I could show you all of the slides, but I can. So we are almost done, guys. This is a project about rain. You can see I learned something. It used to be called stormwater management in Copenhagen. It's not anymore. It's a project that was flooded, and we won the competition, and we gave the city something they didn't ask for. They asked us to work with the flooding of a whole climate area, but we gave them biodiversity and flooding protection. We preserved the traffic solutions as they were, but radically transformed them into something new. Suddenly, you can walk in a roundabout in Copenhagen and cross it and literally be in the wild nature. It looked like this before, it's not that difficult to change. And this is 5 years ago. It's so dense now, it really feels like a forest. And again, everything that you see there is adapted to climate, but again, remember always to bring something that the client didn't ask for. Remember to consider the daily life, the life quality. And the way we did that was with these key elements. That we developed something. The communication I mentioned before. Talk to people like you would talk to your friends, mom and dad, unless they're architects. Care about what you do. Really, really, really care about it. If you care about it, others will so too. Implementation and sharing. So when you go there now, people have all of their own initiatives. They have a group that takes care of bird houses. I was there when the municipality came, and they explained to me how they are maintaining stuff, because they came up with the idea again about this whole stuff. I was like, amazing, sounds great. So people should care. And the biggest thing for it is that I can bring all of my North American clients there, because business is also growing. It's actually a new place, so there's a business case to it. And these Instagram pictures here is not made by me. This is the young generation. That instead of posting the new Air Max or a big vodka bottle from a club or whatever it is, that is also fine. I love that as well. They are also posting city nature. They apparently think it's super cool to live there. This is now becoming a brand for the area, something they're proud of. Businesses are opening, so the developers are very close to measure that you can actually make an impact on the housing. Of course, then you get complaints, because then it's not equity anymore and blah, blah, blah. So there's other challenges with it, but I think it represents the future generations need to care about this. We need to adapt We need to respect what's there. And I think this one is my favorite example. We have winter, like you have winter times here, we use salt. And this is, again, it's climate adaptation, it's caring about the biology here. And this is the sidewalk, this is the house here, right? So when the sidewalk slopes like this does here, it's very important not to get that salt water into the planting beds. We tried to solve that for 20 years. We then came up with this grill. So, this is a sun, and this is a snowflake. So the guy that maintains it, when it's sun, he opens that one, and then the water actually, this one continues into here. Then when it's winter, he closes it over to the snowflake. That means that the salt water goes down to the drain and not continues into here. That took us 20 years. People traveling from Japan, like US, to see this grill, and they are like completely amazed about it. So again, sometimes the world is just slow. But nevertheless, it works. You can now get that solution for free. I think this is also an important one. This is the maintenance, right? We do city nature and nature-based design, so we also need to do nature-based maintenance. So when we discovered that the pH value were too low, we were like, you need to do something. And the municipality were like, we can't, what do you mean? So we ordered a truck full of cone sheets, pine cone sheets, and I think it was 15 cubic meters. And then the guys who take care of it, they shoveled the pine cone sheets into the planting, so the pH value will become rightfully. So again, it's not something that is written anywhere, but they at least liked it. And then I will show this movie, and then we are ending. Normally there's sound, not today. There was before. Let me just see. No. Okay, maybe we should see if this was my grand finale. Let me see if the net is on. Well, it should be on.
gentrification into like types of houses. I'm curious kind of the kind of idea of projects bringing a lot of business and development to the area. Has SLA considered or given any thought to sort of these issues of like displacement and sort of activity in the built environment, or is that?
I think one of the questions in equity that we often get is we have this project and another one that is called Sønder Boulevard, which is a previous train track, and all of the housing property value raised. Of course, there's still social housing, that affordable housing, and we often get that why. And I think one of my answers is that's because the rest of the city is so lame in quality that if apparently we can change the housing, it's because everyone should have this. So that's the easy thing. I think the other one is to acknowledge the social impact of green informal spaces, and to use it. If you take urban heat, the social impact actually. I think it was 300 who died in New York of urban heat, and that's the predominantly poor areas. They don't have AC, but they also don't have trees. So yeah, we try actually to overlap. In Copenhagen, we've done that, and in Toronto to overlap the social impact of especially climate adaptation. It's really big, and there is a difference. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
So I've lived in my home for about 30 years, and I'm a landscape architect, and now I'm doing a lot of plant editing, pruning, replanting, moving things about, and I'm wondering if you do management plans for these landscapes, because I've seen people who don't understand this do some really brutal things to plants. So I'm wondering if you have guidance for the professionals and the practices to help maintain.
Oh, we do. It's a good question, and the nature-based maintenance is, as we call it, existential. To understand that it is city nature, it's not nature. There is invasive species, there is a control. But it's way less than what they normally do. But they don't know how to do it because it's not written in a manual. I think the first lessons we learned was in the Novo Nordisk Nature Campus, the farmer, this example I showed where there was trees in the path. They had their own manual that they spent years on developing. And the gardeners who took care of the site were like, what do we do? And then we got paid to walk with them 3 times a year for 3 years. And suddenly the gardeners told us they felt a sense of belonging, respect. Oh, that oak is getting bigger. I think the underplanting here needs a little bit of. So it became a dialogue, because you can't maintain it with a. You need to mow the lawn 5 times, and it's all written, because maintenance is also often where the monies are lowest. So the whole maintenance aspect is very, very important, and something we take serious. We also guide municipalities about nature-based maintenance on other projects that we have on the site also.
I'm curious, thank you for this presentation, this was great. A lot of these solutions seem to be focused on places that get a lot of rainfall. I'm curious what you know about nature-based solutions in places that don't get a lot of rainfall. Is there a lot of...
I'm kind of like the expert in the world on that, but I just didn't brought any slides. But we did Alfay Park. I will try to do this short. 7 years ago, I came to Abu Dhabi. I had no intention to work there. We worked for the municipality of Abu Dhabi. And I brought the Hans Tausen's project where you see the flooding, to be honest. And they laughed at me and said that it hadn't rained for 3 years. And I didn't do any research. And then I tried a little bit and studied and understood why they laughed at me. And I learned that we had no knowledge. So we spent 1 year investigating all of the natural trees that grow in the desert in UAE. We paid it ourselves. We had 2 biologists driving around, watching all of the habitats, and we wrote a book. There's 700 species in UAE, and you can get around only 200 or 300 of them in commercially available nurseries. And suddenly we had a book, so suddenly I went out to the clients and they tried to steal my book. And I was like, no, I won't give it to you, and you can give me a project. And the award we got from a World Architecture Festival, the award where it was sent to a jury. That year we won for the ski slope in Copenhagen with BIG, and we won for the Middle Eastern one. We've reduced the water consumption with 50%. We have a new system, and the way we do it is that every nation's culture is linked to every nation's nature. And what they do in the Middle East is they try to compete with Las Vegas. So this is the first park that we've done that it has no lawns. It worked with the natural species. It's called a gaff tree. It's a national tree. It grows voluntarily in the desert. So you can do biodiversity in cities and countries that has no rain as well. And I think that's some of the most interesting thing you can do at all, is to constantly work with the climate and the local nature and find an inspiration there. But it took us a long time, but yeah, I would dare to say that we know a lot about it. We have written the manual for which trees they can plant. We have made the planting strategy for the whole municipality. And we have just handed in 104 parks designed, ready to be built. So we have at least some experience. Yeah?
I really was intrigued by this point where you talked about infrastructure can be a divider as well as a connector.
Yeah.
Because historically in America, highways have acted as a big racial divider, and it's divided class and socioeconomic status. Do you think that the projects that your firm does, is there applicability to the larger scale problems we see in America with infrastructure and race?
Yeah, I think so. I think in the end, like the approach in UK where you do landscape-led master plans is an indication of a new hierarchy in cities. That you shouldn't start with streets. They took the first choice, right? And then the architects or developers come in and do the buildings. They took the second choice, and then we have to follow those things. It's weird, because I think I tried to explain it last week. Or some weeks ago, I was in Toronto for David Crombie Park, a park we are doing, which is very amazing. It's a linear though, so it's still, but it's unbroken, because it was designed for trains. That's the only way you can get a green corridor, because the trains can't stop. But neither can the mammals. They actually die when they cross the street. So I think the thing that biodiversity, stormwater, all of these things need is connectivity. But we only cared about connectivity for cars. So I think, yeah, generally we need to challenge cities. We need to challenge the grid structures. But the answer lies in the communication and the argue towards people who need to talk about social value, the financial value for properties, or whatever they need to hear to convince them. So a big job for us as designers is to convince people to talk that language. But yeah, I think you could do a lot here. So we are trying to. Hi.
When you were discussing how you connected a city with the river,
Yeah.
you were discussing how you presented different options.
Yeah.
And you listed different levels of diversity. How do you find those levels of diversity for each architectural design?
That's because I have a team of biologists, otherwise I would not be able to. So yeah, I gave them a chance to study that. It was very difficult to measure. Normally net gain biodiversity is like, the rule is 110%. So you need to create net gain biodiversity in UK. and we didn't know how to calculate it, but they calculated it to around 600 up to 1,200. So you can't really, but that's why we are interdisciplinary. It's because we believe in those values, but we also respect, again, the communication and the skills. I'm just a landscape architect. I have no other education. I don't even have leadership or project management. I am probably the less educated of all of my colleagues, but I'm also aware that I'm just a landscape architect. I have a passion and a value, but I need the other competences in my studio to fulfill the visions. And cities are so complicated. They're so complex. So if you don't have all of these arguments, and it's also interesting, because then suddenly the salamander or the bat or whatever it is starts to design its value. So that is how we deal with it. So I was supposed to do a slide but I forgot. But we just evaluated all of our parks in Abu Dhabi, and the biologists made a slide where it's like, don't add. Normally we come up with an idea, then we confirm it with the biologists, and we're like, we're done. We don't want to work with you like that. They are colleagues, right? So start with the biologists, keep us intact all throughout the whole process, because green is just a color.
One more question, personal hand up.
Yeah, I was just, you sort of started to answer, but I was wondering how much you do in terms of post-project evaluation on the ecology and ecological impacts to sort of refine your future project.
So when the client allows us, we do a baseline mapping. So that's like the existing ecology. In the beginning, we had an idea that we should always have external, so it's not ourselves who claim the amount of biodiversity we get. The client don't want to pay for it. So if we can get paid for it, we do it, but if not, we just try to do it ourselves the best. And again, it's not